Good morning, everyone. It's 8:30. Time to start this workshop. So there's no confusion. We have an 8:30 workshop, and then we have a 9 o'clock workshop. The 8:30 workshop is dealing with county debt reduction to capital as the topic, and we will begin that after a roll call from our clerk.
This is a public workshop of the Citrus County Board of County Commissioners this 24th day of May 2022. In attendance are Chairman Ronald D. Kitchen Jr., First Vice Chair Ruthie Sheba, Second Vice Chair Holly Davis, Commissioner Scott Carnahan, County Administrator Randy Oliver, and County Attorney Denise A. Diamond Lynn.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Oliver, you want to get us going with this?
Okay, yes, Robin, if you can pull up the first PowerPoint on debt. The first thing that we've given you is a current picture of our debt. I would note that we will be bringing forward we went out for RFP for a financial advisor. We've selected PFM, and there should be a contract coming forward. As it relates to future debt, we have one thing in particular that we're looking at, the connections through the Topeka agreement for Citrus Springs have been significant. So we're going to be looking at a vehicle that we can do the special assessments to fund that, because right now we're funding it out of water and sewer reserves, and that money's not going to be there, but these debts get paid. If you recall, when you connect, you can have up to 10 years to pay it. So we're going to come up with a revolver that's going to let us put things on and off of there as people pay those, because special assessments tend to go up and down. But I think what we want to do is we've got some debt in the next couple of years that's going to drop off. We need, I gather the purpose of this workshop is to determine when debt is appropriate and necessary, and, you know, as debt expires, what do you want to do with the additional funds? Because clearly there will be continuing capital needs in the future. So with that, you want to... Yeah, who puts down the screen? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay. I really didn't plan on going through each individual slide unless there was a need. It basically just lays out what our picture is when the debt expires. There's some that I wish I could have what's called refunded, meaning I could have gotten rid of it and for a better interest rate. But at the time that debt instrument was done, it was a make whole provision, and make whole means that you have to pay the principal and interest regardless of when you pay it off. So it didn't make any sense to try to pay that debt off, because you'd had to pay the whole thing anyway and then pay even more interest. So unless there are any specific questions as it relates to this debt analysis, or somebody would like to go through the whole thing, I'll leave that up to you.
I don't think that's necessary, Mr. Oliver. Let me ask a couple of questions in generic terms, and then maybe we can get to the policy issue, which is the main reason I actually asked for this topic to be discussed. In round numbers over the next few years, the concept is that we have debt. Some of it has been long-term, some of it's nearing maturity. So the question really was, what is the policy going to be as that debt is retired? Is that money going to be then earmarked just for another capital issue, for another, for infrastructure needs? Is it going to go back into the general fund? So those are the kind of discussions that I thought that we should talk about. And the first one dealing with is how much. In other words, at what point in time over the next few years will debt start dropping off, and we'll say, well, again, you don't have to be specific, as I know you like to be, but maybe we just keep it in, $500,000 increments or something that you can give us a rough idea. But it appears it's like 2025 we start to see the first drop off of it, and then so I guess it's amounts in time would be the first question.
Yeah, it drops in a little bit in 2025. There's a significant drop in 26 if you look at the third page of the presentation. It drops from the current $7 million level to a little over $5 million, stays at $5 million for the next 3 years, And then in 2032, it drops down to 3 million. So that basically is, you know, when the debt's paid off, the difference in that delta, you could either use that to go towards future capital projects, you could bond additional things if you felt that was appropriate, or, you know, whatever you determine was the best interest of the citizens.
See, so again, round numbers, we're at 7, and in 3 to 4 years, we're looking at 5, so that's a $2 million a year reduction, and then going down further, that's another 2 or 3 million after that. See, so my point, when we were talking before about tax increases and that type of thing, is that if we can come up with some kind of plan, we would be able to repurpose this, what we're spending in debt, and by debt, I mean principal and interest, that we could turn around and use that if we so choose, or future board so chose, to use that, say, for road resurfacing or other, you know, road rebuilding projects, or, you know, we keep talking about the Ozella Trail and those type of issues, you know, and so the point is the money that we're spending on some of this debt, you know, for the public, if you're making a mortgage on your home and you have for 20 years and you pay off your mortgage, what do you plan on doing with the money when you pay off your mortgage? You know, you got to save it, you got to build another house, you're going to fix up the one you have, or, so I think that's the policy question that I think should be in front of the board, and be curious to hear what everybody thinks about it. So, morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
How you doing? Want to go first? You looked at me, so I'll give you the opportunity if you want to go first. And if you don't look at me anymore.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Good morning. I apologize. There's a long line at the snack machine this morning.
More
All
likely
kidding aside.
the coffee pot, more likely.
You know, the needs, the future needs of the county, we've been talking about the past few meetings. Infrastructure, road resurfacing are the glaring ones. Courthouse is coming. You know, we've got some major stuff coming down the pipeline that needs to be funded. And so my position would be any savings that we get from paying off debt needs to be allocated in a fund that is either earmarked specifically for infrastructure, or like I said, we've got the courthouse coming that is going to be a big nut. We've talked about setting aside revenues that we get back from the constitutionals into that fund. I'm not sure that that's going to get us there on the same timeline that the judges are looking for a new courthouse to be built, but there's savings here that we need to be looking at for that purpose. So that's where I would be on it.
And Mr. Oliver, it seems to me that the constitutional funds have dried up to some degree when we look at what they've been over previous years and what they have been recently. So the plan of putting that money aside for that purpose, if there's no money to put aside, then that, as Commissioner Kennard says, we might never get there.
Yes, it's not a significant sum of money over the years. It's been reduced. I've got a history of it for about the last 5 or 10 years, which I can give you.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me that most of the years we were in the $300,000, $400,000 category, and some years combined it was over $1 million, I think.
That is correct.
So, Commissioner Davis, anything?
Yes, sir. I would agree with Commissioner Kennard that we need to reinvest these and to put it aside for capital funds as some of our debt payments become freed up. I would say from a policy standpoint, I am not, an additional comment I would make is to say that in my personal life, and certainly I believe Mr. Oliver shares my opinion on this, for the county, I'm not afraid of taking on new debt as long as interest rates are incredibly low. Debt should always be used strategically, not because you have to, would be my point. And so since interest rates are obviously going up and up and up right now, then, you know, we need to try to put aside and fund things without taking on more debt if we can at all avoid it at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Slabaugh, anything?
Yeah, I agree. I would be curious to see, I have a couple questions. One, if we free up, as the money gets freed up, is there any of the capital improvement bonds that are higher interest rate, and can we use, like you said, put that money towards paying that down if there's no penalties? And, or, saying, okay, this is gonna be the priority for, the judges, putting that to the fund, put that money in that certain fund, designated fund. That would be all the questions I would have.
Okay. Yeah, Commissioner Carnahan.
Nope, I think everything's well said. When this debt, you got a lot of infrastructure issues coming, a lot of buildings, things like that. I think everybody's on the right page of taking this money and earmarking it to put it in those positions.
Well, what I hear, Mr. Oliver, the consensus seems to be is just don't recapture it into the general fund, but earmark it for future capital. And so what are your thoughts on that? And how would you recommend something like that be structured? I mean, again, moving forward into future years, so.
Well, a lot of governmental entities create a debt policy. I mean, debt used appropriately is a good thing. For example, if you are going to build an additional court complex, is it fair to get the citizens today to pay the whole thing? Okay, or is it fairer to finance it over time and let the future citizens that are going to use those facilities help pay for that? I guess the question is, do you all want a written policy that requires any debt that's paid off to come back into the capital improvement program?
Well, again, that would be up for the board to discuss and decide. I kind of like written policies because they can be changed in the future, but if we don't have something like that, then people kind of shoot from the hip as they move along, and future boards might say, well, we got 10 million over here not doing anything, let's spend it on this, if they don't know that it's been earmarked for something that was seen as a long-term need. So I personally think it would be a good idea to develop some type of debt policy. Obviously, in the past, I think any kind of new debt policy says we will never enter into one of these make-whole contracts again. That should go without saying. That because regardless of what the interest, unless it's zero interest, because then you have nothing to lose, right? But the concept that who would buy something like that? I mean, I've always been, and I won't even mention the word that was used for the purchase of a piece of property over in the other side of the county near Crystal River that sits in the Meadowcrest area, but that's that we would spend that kind of money on those kind of agreements is crazy. So that was my point, is that we probably should come up with some kind of policy that we start from, and of course, commissioners in the future are always free to change those as they see fit. So what you all say on that? Seems like we're all in the same category, right? So.
We can come up with a policy to that effect if the board likes.
Yeah, and I'd be interested in your, since you have a large background in these financial issues, I think that would be, I mean, we have an investment policy. I don't know why we don't have a debt policy as well. But I agree with your funding, especially on large road projects. It's always made sense to bond roads that are going to last 20 and 30 and 50 years rather than trying to do that. So, and again, let's also point out when people talk about the debt that we have, when you say, $124 million in outstanding debt, a large part of that is water and sewer, correct?
That is correct.
So people
The
should.
largest portion is.
Right, so people should understand that it's, when you go out and build a water treatment plant or whatever, that's not something you write a check to do. It's usually very expensive, right? So, and all the ongoing projects, so.
The county's in a great debt position. I mean, we're not debt heavy.
Right. And that shows from the way we're treated when it comes to when we do borrow money,
Right.
correct?
We're viewed very favorably right now by the rating agencies.
So moving forward with this, what would you recommend that we ask you to go back and construct some kind of debt policy to come back to us in the future of what will happen and how it'll be accumulated and what we'll be looking at, and then that'll give you and future staffs some kind of direction to move with?
Sure, we can do that.
Okay. Before I'm just up to public input, any of the other, anything follow up? Want to make sure we leave here today with, we're kind of all on a same thing? Yes.
I don't think that it's stuff that necessarily has to go into a debt policy, but I would like to see some conversation, and maybe at some point it does work into our policy, our long-term plan. You know, we need to, we're going to need to address Cardinal, we're going to need to address Croft Road, we're going to need to address 491 north out of Beverly Hills. We've got some major projects ahead of us, not to mention Ozella Trail, like you talked about, possibly Fort Island Trail. Those are some big price tags on just those few projects, and they need to come into the long-term planning, so that when future boards, you know, maybe they are having a discussion about the debt policy that we're going to start working on, that needs to direct them to look at, you've got these big projects either in front of you or coming up right behind you very quickly. And before you start changing this debt policy, take a look at these big projects that need to be addressed. So anyway, just my thought on it.
Yeah. Yes,
We
sir.
need help on those projects. We're gonna need a lot of help from the MPO and FDOT, because those projects are gonna be substantial and significant amount of money.
Yeah, just to give you an example of what I was thinking about when I brought this topic up, at the TBRPC, it's one of the few planning councils that years ago bought their building. Okay, so, and it's a building that over time, they consolidated their services and rent virtually half of it out. Okay, so at this point in time, the rent that they bring in pays the mortgage. So they're not dependent on government funds as much as others. But the point I brought up, within 2 years, their mortgage will be paid off.
Right.
So the point I brought up was that, well, you know, now you own your building, so this roof is going to be very, very expensive when you have to replace it. So, and air conditioning units and all that type of thing. So I suggested to them, which I think they're going to do, is for their initial policy will be to take whatever they were paying on the mortgage payment and put it in, set it aside for future maintenance for the building, because no impact on the budget, same money being spent. And then when time does come, they won't need to go out and borrow again against that. They will be able to pay as they go. Plus, it gives them a little cushion, too, in case we get into hard times in the future, which everybody seems to be predicting is right around the corner again. So, okay, any final comments on any of that then? You okay with all that, Mr. Oliver?
I am.
Okay, this time, dealing with this topic, just so we don't have any confusion, is there anyone that wishes to speak to the board on the topic we've been discussing? Anything at all? No interest in $124 million in debt? Okay, very good. So we have no, yes, sir, please come on.
I was waiting for everybody else to go up, expecting everybody else to come up.
Okay, if you would just give us your name for the record, don't forget to fill out a green card.
Frank Papson, Arrowhead, Orlando, Florida. I got a couple of questions about this budget. When this debt was originally orchestrated, were the taxpayers forced to pay more because of this special project? And if they were, what was the debt going to, I don't know what the debt is for, so therefore I can't comment on it. But my point being, this is surplus money that actually belongs to the people. This money you're going to allocate for whatever projects you want to do. But some of the things that you should take into consideration is what is the most demanding thing facing our community, and allocate that money for that. That's number one. And the second point that I want to make is when you allocate money for any project and you have a surplus, don't go spending it on pet projects. which will be a later time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment on this topic? Anyone else? Okay, so we'll close the public comment. One thing I would say, just so you're clear, any debt related to utilities, right, Mr. Oliver, water and sewer, is basically paid by the ratepayers. That does not come from the general fund. So unless it's general fund projects, those special utility categories are what pays the debt, right? Okay, very good. Well, if we have no other public comment, commissioners, anything else?
No, sir.
Have a few minutes to stretch our legs. It's 8:51. We will be back in 9 minutes for the workshop on the extension of the turnpike.